going to the New Testament, Abraham's obviously a big, gigantic figure. Genesis 15 is a big, gigantic text in the New Testament that we're really, really happy with in one place and really confused with in another place. Romans 4, happy, on board, right? Because we get it. And I talked about Romans 4 last week. So you have Romans 4 and Genesis 15:6, where Paul shows basically this: justification by faith began with Abraham. That's Paul's message in Romans 4. I'm not making this up. What I'm saying is what God has always done. Take, for instance, our father Abraham as case in point. Right? And then he proceeds to say, in regard to Abraham, Abraham's relationship with God was not like the relationship of an employee and a boss. Right? It's based on a gift. No employee on payday, you might be thankful you got your... everybody in here, I'm assuming, has received a paycheck of some kind at some point. Most everybody. Now, you may have been grateful and thankful that you got it, but at no time, I don't think, did you ever think, this is the best gift anybody ever gave me. Because it's not a gift. Now, you could really theologize it and say, all life is a gift, brother. I get it. But I'm talking about in like just straight up, here's the level of existence that we actually live on, right? And that is that when I get paid for the work I do, I feel like I'm getting this because I deserved it. Because I worked for it, we had an agreement. And Paul's point in Romans 4 is, that's not how it works. It's all gift. If you want to know why I know this, and why you know this to be true, he points to Abraham, right? And then he also cites Psalm 32, saying that, Abraham's sins are totally forgiven. Just like it says, just like David says, blessed is the man for whom God does not count sin. Right? Explains it with Psalm 32. Anyway, so we're pretty good with that. Then comes Paul's buddy, James, who, of all texts to cite, cites Genesis 15:6 to show what? That salvation is not by faith alone. And immediately we launch into, I've got to protect Paul from James. Meaning, I've got to protect my theology from James. Because I think I'm Paul's man on earth. And God has put me here to protect Paul from James. And to tell the world, James doesn't mean what he says. He means something else. Don't worry, I'm going to save Paul. Now, the fact of the matter is, that's probably an exaggeration. It isn't. I've seen it. The fact of the matter is, our job is not to save Paul from James or James from Paul. God is quite able to take care of both of them. So we come to James. This is chapter 2. We could wish, those of us from a particular theological trajectory, could wish that James had never read Genesis 15:6. Our life would be so much easier because we'd have the nice, neat package that we so much want to have and claim to have. But often it is much ado about nothing, because what we'll end up hearing is James means something different from by justification. He means vindication. Paul means justification. And I think, really? Paul doesn't mean vindication too? You sure? Show me. And then some evidence is wheeled out. We don't have to do backflips to show that Paul and James agree with one another. We just have to read both of them and ask this question. Why are they talking this way? And remember they're not talking first and foremost to each other about the same thing. And remember, they're not talking to the same people. That's extraordinarily important too. So James comes and he quotes Genesis 15:6, seemingly to show that Paul is wrong. Probably everybody in here has heard the phrase justification by faith alone before. It only appears in the Bible once. Where? In James 2, to say that justification is not by faith alone. I'm talking about just the quote, the concept, yeah, Habakkuk and other places. The actual phrase, the word-for-word phrase, by faith, justification by faith alone, only appears just in James. For him to say, oh, you know what? It's not justification by faith alone. So, two things to think about. Are they writing to the same group of people for the same reason? And here's the vital question. Is it what they mean by justification or what they mean by faith that's important? If we come at this as the great defenders of justification on earth, then we might miss the fact that justification's not up for grabs. It's the meaning of the word faith that is the difference between what James and Paul are talking about, not justification. Right? And this can be easily seen. Look at James chapter 2. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Okay, the next statement is it. Here you go. Let's solve the problem. Can that faith save them? That's as far as you need to go. That's it. I'm not saying all of a sudden every question is answered, but it's how you read verse 14 that matters. James does not say, can faith save him? He doesn't say that. What does he say? Just say it back to me. Can that faith save him? Now, somebody in here may know, and I'll tell you if you don't, that in Greek, there is no that in the text. It's just faith. But virtually every English translation has the word that in it. You know why? Because they should. Here's why. Just ask yourself this simple question. Is James talking about faith in general? It's easy. There's no way to answer yes to that question. He is talking about a specific sort of faith, but in Greek you don't have to say that to be clear about it. You can, but you don't have to. You don't have to have the Greek. And there is a Greek word for that. Some of you have had elementary Greek and other things. You know that there is. If you haven't, that's fine. You don't have to have Greek to be in this class. But there is, in fact, we ought to be honest, no Greek word for the word that. However, there needs to be one in English unless we think that James is just saying, can faith save that person? Well, he doesn't just say a person of faith. He says something specific. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no works? That is a particular sort of faith that James is talking about, whether the word that is there in Greek or not. It needs to be there in English to communicate literally what James is saying. So this is a good example of if you would say, now literally there's no that in the Greek. So what? That doesn't literally tell me anything. That tells me literally the syntax of the Greek sentence, which doesn't need the word that, but in context you need it in English if you want to translate the literal meaning of James. You need it. It's got to work both ways. And then, if you're still not convinced, just keep reading, because James keeps talking about the same thing. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. Now see what he's going to do. He's going to give these examples of somebody who claims faith but doesn't have works. More examples of that particular kind of faith that James is talking about that does not do what? Justify, ultimately. Right? That's what it is. That's what it is. So he goes on to say, brother or sister, is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, be warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In other words, you bless them. Have a blessed day, brother. God be with you. This tract is worth more than the money I could give you, right? Than the blanket you need, right? I'm going to throw a verse at you. That'll give you eternal warmth, right? Listen, I know you're hungry. You haven't eaten for days. Your stomach is growling so loud you can't hear anything, but I'm going to preach at you for an hour. Then I'll give you some food. Because it's eternal salvation that's more important to you. And the guy's like, whatever, man, I'll sit through anything to be warm for an hour and get some food. You just do your thing. I've tuned out 1,000 preachers before you. I'll tune you out too. Right? Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's the same thing, by the way, as what James is talking about. But if that's all it is, if it's just, if you're just blessing somebody, but you're not actually taking care of them and showing that you love them in any kind of way when they have obvious need, then it raises a question about your confession. Right? I am not laying down the law of the Medes and the Persians about how you should do, like, prison or shelter ministry, by the way. Just give me an example that I think a lot of us can relate to. So, right, just keep that to yourself. So anyhow, he says, in the same way, faith itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I got deeds. Well, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. Now the blow that cannot be overcome. You think you're super orthodox? You think your confession is exactly right? Good for you. You believe that there is one God. Good for you. Even the demons believe that. But they shudder. Now, that is, in my view, in the view of many, an allusion to the Shema. The confession of monotheism in all of Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Right? Deuteronomy 6, the Shema. It is the one-statement phrase of orthodoxy in Judaism. It is the statement, there is God and there is no other God. He is one. He is our God. You say it perfectly. You've got all your theological ducks in a row. You believe all the right stuff and you confess all the right stuff. If it stops there, congratulations, you have risen to the level of demon faith. Because the demons are able to manage that. The demons can say, while everybody else says, who is this guy? The demons can say, what do you have to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? It's not because they don't know who He is. Sometimes they're the only ones who knows who He is. The demons can quote every confession you can quote. The demons can quote every Bible verse you can quote and probably more. Because that is just knowledge of some things that are true. Now, I have no inroads onto demon cognition. And I'm not pretending to. All I'm saying is, if we just have confession, and it can be the most orthodox confession in the world, if we don't have support that shows that we mean what we say, then we don't give any evidence of being any better off than demons who know God is true. Right? However twisted they know that, I don't know. That's what James is saying. That's it. So what James is talking about is not whether faith, he's not talking about whether justification is by faith. You have to put the faith, Paul says faith, you have to put James's word faith, as it were, in quotes, like the way we would. We would use dreaded air quotes, faith, which means not faith. This is empty faith. This is not even faith. It's the absence of faith. That's really what it is. It's that faith, the faith that says, I believe and confess, but shows no evidence of it. It's empty. It is not, in fact, saving faith, the saving faith that Paul talks about. They're not disagreeing with one another. You don't have to like mush them together so Paul can win. James is fine on his own.